Kia ora team, welcome back to our bugs unit. And so today I'm going to be talking about setting, and in particular about the place Taupo that our novel is set in. It would be really good if you took some notes as I'm talking you through this. There will be some bullet points on the slides and things like that. You will find that a lot of the things that I am talking about will relate to character and also to theme, and so this will be useful background information for the characters and for the themes as you are embarking on analysing the novel. And so I'll make reference to a few things in the book, and I'll just talk about a couple of things that I think would be quite good for you to be aware of. The first thing I'd like to talk about is the wealth divide in Taupo. And so we see various different groups. So we've got the tourists who frequent the little town. So there's like the town itself is largely built on tourism, and there are lots and lots of tourist attractions. Natural features like the Huka Falls, thermal like hot springs and thermal parks, spas. There's obviously Tongariro National Park, and there's jet boats. And so what Bugs realizes, or what Bugs understands really clearly, is that you can have a lot of fun in Taupo if you have the money. And so she doesn't have the money, and so the locals' experience for Bugs and Jez is very different. Those are our two Māori characters, and so they've got a vastly different experience of what it is like to live and work in Taupo. So Nikki, Bugs' mum, works 2 jobs to keep her and Bugs afloat, and to make sure that they've got enough to eat and can basically pay for their basic living costs. She's got 1 job at a hotel where tourists are staying, and so in a way through the novel we are getting a glimpse of what life in Taupo is like on the other side of the coin. And so the tourists experience the nice and shiny and adventurous part, and really what Nikki and Bugs in particular, and also Trace get an insight in, is what it takes to make that experience happen. So there's people working in the background cleaning the hotels and providing food and things like that, and running these adventure attractions, which make it such a great experience for tourists and a much, much different experience for the locals. We also learn, just by implication, that Jez's mum does not have a job, and she's unemployed, so it seems to us that she's unable to find a job. It's really challenging for her. Shelley Fox, on the other hand, Stone Cold's or Charmaine Fox's mum, she doesn't work because she doesn't have to. So her husband, Mr. Fox, works in the army, or for the army, and he's earning enough so that his wife can stay home. So we've got a vastly different setup in terms of their family structures. The key things, I guess, to remember here is thinking about the social divide and the class divide in Taupo, is that all the fun things to do in Taupo are expensive, and so Bugs and Jez can't actually afford them. They live or come from families who are struggling to stay afloat financially, and so Jez's mum is unemployed. He's really exposed to a violent stepfather whose main source of income is dealing drugs. They live in an apartment, and so there's quite an interesting divide as well through the type of housing that those characters have. So Jez and his mum, they live in an apartment which we assume is state housing, so an apartment building, while Bugs and Nikki live in a house, and so this is their own house on their own land, and Bugs' grandparents and her uncle also live on a farm which is a bit outside Taupo, and so they also own land. So just remember what we talked about earlier, and what some of you might have covered last year as well. Obviously if we look at New Zealand history, there has been colonisation of the British coming to New Zealand, and as a consequence of that there has been quite a big shift for Māori, and so while there was usually or initially a really strong connection to the land because of the system that was brought in by the European immigrants, there was a move towards the cities because that's where the jobs were. And so lots of Māori people, Māori family, were moving into the cities to find jobs to be able to support their families, which often meant that they lost the connection to the land. And we can see that illustrated. This is a very simplified version, obviously, but we can see this illustrated in Bugs, in the novel Bugs, because we can see that Jez is probably the furthest removed from being connected to the land and his ancestry at all. We can also see that Bugs and Nikki are slightly more connected to their ancestry and also to their land, because they own their own land. But also they have that connection within their family, so they still have the grandparents around, and there's clearly a strong connection between Bugs and her grandparents, but also between Bugs and her uncle. So she's sort of being raised by more than just one person. She's got the whole family, her whole whānau around her to support her, and we realise that Jez does not have that. And we will have a closer look at how that basically comes out. There is obviously a bit more to say about Charmaine. So while Jez lives in an apartment and Bugs lives in a house, even though it's sort of small and dampish, Charmaine lives in a friggin' castle, as Bugs puts it. So it's a very large house. She's got a sleep out and she's got her own TV. Bugs notices that she's got all sorts of different electronic gadgets, so to speak. Like, she's obviously got a phone, she's I think got a PlayStation, there's a home gym in their house. Their spacing in around the house is also quite interesting because Charmaine's room is quite separate from the living space of her parents. She gets all sorts of goods, so she gets a car so she can learn to drive. And so interestingly enough, the punishment for her driving with passengers is losing her car. So obviously she's on her learner's license, and so she's not allowed to take passengers. And so her mum is taking the car away from her, and then Shelley is still driving her to school and dropping her off, whereas both Jez and Bugs' mum would just make their kids walk. And so you can see that there's sort of kind of different ways of parenting as well that are displayed, and different levels of consequence that the kids have to experience. And so Charmaine is really in a lot of ways oblivious to the social and the class situation that Jez and Bugs find themselves in. So she reckons that Bugs not having a mobile phone is child abuse, when really, like, Bugs has got a very different understanding of what child abuse is, and we get a glimpse of that when Jez is actually abused by, significantly physically abused by his stepfather. And so these three characters have got very different experiences in the same town. They're in the same classes, and often in many cases, and they are also obviously at the same school. So there's quite a lot here for you to sort of explore how the characters have got different experiences. The other thing that I want to get to in terms of the context will be the myths and legends, and so that'll be the next clip for you to follow through. But as you're thinking about character, make sure that you take into account the elements of setting that tell us something about all of our characters. So actually we learn quite a lot by the surroundings that they have been placed in, and we are making some judgments and drawing some conclusions based on the experience that these characters might have had because of their upbringing and the environment that they grew up in. Alright guys, check in with you later. Take care and have a good day. Bye.